Well, hey there, welcome to another video all about writing your source analysis. So uh, this week we're starting out with this process, and we'll be looking to do essentially two of these source analyses each week. And once we've done 8 of them, that will form our folio, or the analysis of our sources, as well as the 2 pages of planning that you've done from your proposal. So this really is putting together bit by bit your folio, getting it ready for submission later on in the semester. So if you've opened up your source analysis guide document, I'm just going to run you through how I would go about doing one of these source analyses. So first of all, the thing that we need to record is the reference details. So if you've watched any of the other videos when we've talked about referencing a book or website, etc. So we want to put that full reference in at the top of your page. Secondly, though, we want to have a look at the key findings. So let's say you've had you're looking at a website, for example, and as you're going through it, you're finding some information there that would be useful in answering multiple of your sub-questions. What I would be doing is going through, whether you copy and paste that website into a Word document and then color coding the information according to your sub-questions. And this can be a really easy way of seeing whether you're actually getting information that's helping you to answer each of your sub-questions. And so what I would do if I'm having a look at a website is to color code what I'm seeing in that website. And then with the key findings, I would actually just be putting that information, the key information, key dot points really, what is the most important information from this site, what has been the most helpful in helping to answer your sub-questions, and ultimately your main question. So I want to see what you found from this source here in the key findings part. It looks quite small because there's only the one question, but you might find that you have quite a few key findings from the sources that you have looked at. Secondly, the thing we need to have a look at is research process. So in your proposal, you talked about the fact that you were going to try finding information in a variety of sources, and for most of you in your feedback, I tried to get you to think really deeply about who it was specifically that you were going to target, because what I'm looking for in the proposal pages and your planning pages is what is it that you hope to do. When I look at these pages though, what I'm looking for is, have you actually gone out and done what you said you were going to do? So if you said to begin with, I'm going to email certain people, I'm going to email this professor, or I'm going to email this doctor, I actually want to see here whether you've actually gone and done that. So 3 questions to really think about. Firstly, what led you to find this source? If it was an internet search, I want to know what you searched. I want you to be that specific. What did you have to do in order to obtain this source? The second question. So if you went out and emailed, or went and got an interview with somebody, you wrote your survey, I want to know that too. Thirdly, did you have any issues in finding this information? So maybe it was you didn't quite get your search terms quite right. Maybe it was that you just weren't able to get in contact with certain people. Maybe you put your survey in a place, maybe on Facebook or something, that wasn't getting you the results that you're after. So I want you to be able to talk about that process as well. The more that we're able to analyze how well we've done with our research processes, the better our evaluation is going to be. But we'll talk about that as we go throughout the semester. Thirdly, we're going to have a look at something known as reliability. So we basically want to know whether the information that you're saying was really helpful, whether we can actually rely on that information. Can we say that this information is true and that we can trust it? That's essentially what we're looking at. So we've got a few questions to help you try and get you thinking about this. So firstly, does the source have an author? Well, if your source doesn't have an author, I wouldn't be using it, to be honest. And so basically, I want you to see whether you can find information about your author, because the more information that we can find, the more likely it is that we can say, yes, this person was qualified to actually give this opinion. If you're looking at a medical question, for example, you're probably going to want sources written by people with PhDs, or maybe people who are doctors or trained in that particular field. If you're looking at women's AFL, you're probably not going to ask somebody who plays badminton, for example. You want to make sure that your people who are creating these sources for you to use, they're actually people who know what they're talking about. If you're looking at websites, for example, you might find a header or logo. So when we had a look at the Beyond Blue website, Beyond Blue was all over that website. We can see that that organization was presenting that information. What is the purpose of the website? Is it to inform, persuade, sell, share, or entertain? So you've got to think about, why was this source created? What is its aim? What are they trying to do? And lastly, can the information be cross-referenced to increase the source's reliability? We're going to see the phrase cross-reference all the time, and I'm going to be asking you to cross-reference your information all the time. Essentially, if one source says the Bulldogs won the grand final last year, and then another source says it was the Tigers who won the grand final, well, how do we know which one is true? And so what we would have to do is go out and find a third website or a third source, which would help us to work out whether it was either the Bulldogs or the Tigers. And hopefully, if they said the Tigers, then we'd have two sources that say the Tigers, one that says the Bulldogs, and we can probably trust that the information is true when it comes to the Tigers winning the grand final last year. Obviously, the information that you're looking for is going to be a tad more complicated than that. So we're really looking for you to find a number of sources that all suggest the same thing, because the more sources that you have pushing one idea, the more reliable that idea is going to be, the more likely it is that that's actually going to be the answer that you need. So that's reliability in a nutshell. Moving on down to bias. So we'll talk about bias a lot. A bias is essentially just providing one point of view. So when you're doing topics, say for example vaccinations, you find that lots of sources can be quite biased because they only refer to one side of the argument. They might say, no, vaccinations are the worst thing you can do. They give you autism, etc. And they will only present evidence that suggests that that is true. What we're looking for, hopefully, is that we're finding sources that balance both sides of the argument. And that's what you're going to need to do when you write your outcome. You're looking for evidence that looks at both sides of the argument. Even if you believe that, in the case of immunizations, everyone should be immunized, still you're having a look at why some people might choose not to go with that. So some questions to help you think about that. Does the author use stereotypes, generalizations, or exaggeration when they present their information? Do they present a balance of views, or just one person's perspective, or just one side of the story? Sometimes you might find that sources are trying to, or organizations are trying to sell you something through their information. Maybe if it's a website for a vitamin company, for example, who would say, well, our vitamins are the best vitamins that you can possibly get. That might not be the case, and so we would need to consider all of the evidence that is available to us. So even though the sources can be biased, they can still be really useful. It's just really important that we weigh up both sides of the argument and that we're willing to have a look at multiple sources, multiple viewpoints, because ultimately that's going to give us the most well-rounded answer, and it's what I'll be looking for when you write your outcome. Moving on, having a look at validity. So basically I want to know, how useful was the source in helping you to answer your question? Maybe it was not very useful at all. Maybe it was extremely useful. Somewhere along that continuum, you need to work out how useful it was. I also want to know what sub-questions that particular source helped you to answer. So you might say, yes, the information about having to pay for immunizations, well, that really helped me answer sub-question 3. So I really want you to be clear about how this source has helped you go about answering your sub-question. Then I want you to look at things like whether the information is up to date, so how recently the information was created, whether there's dates on the articles or websites, and how well the information compares or contrasts to other information that you have gathered. So really thinking about whether the information that you found is actually valid and useful for your research. Lastly, two things that we need to think about. And number one there, capability development. So in your proposal you said, yes, I'm going to develop in a certain number of capabilities and this is how I think I'm going to do it. Well, now I need to see whether this source that you found has actually helped you to do that. If you created your survey and your capability was literacy, then you're probably going to find that you were able to communicate with a wider range of people through creating the survey. In that way, you were able to develop in your capability. And lastly, skill development. So whether it was in locating the source, finding the source, particularly if it was an interview or survey, or in planning, if you had to plan the interviews and the questions that you asked in the survey, or in just organizing how you went about trying to get some of your resources. What sorts of skills have you developed in this process? All of these things I'm going to be marking you on in your folio, so it's really important that you don't skip any of this, that you don't try and make light of it. It's really important that you can get as detailed as possible. That's the source analysis guide. So I'll be looking for you to go through this process with 2 of your sources by the end of this week, and then once you get the hang of it, and I've had a bit of a look and can say, yep, you're on the right track, you're answering these questions the right way, then you can just keep going and keep producing your pages. But essentially, the end goal is to have 8 pages where you've gone through this guide with a fine-tooth comb and really explored how it is that you've found the answers to your sub-questions and how that information has been useful. And then you'll be doing quite all right. So hopefully that has helped. If you've got any questions, feel free to ask me in class. But otherwise, good luck, and I look forward to reading your work soon. Thanks.